The Holocaust remains one of humanity's darkest chapters. We've studied the history, the dates, the names, but beyond the horror lies a deeper question. How could this happen? How could ordinary people, governed by the same biological and physical laws as us, participate in something so profoundly inhuman? This isn't a story about war or gore. It's about understanding the mechanics of that tragedy, the science of how humanity can forget itself. We'll look at the biology, the physics, and the psychology that allowed such an event to unfold, not to diminish the history, but to understand the human capacity for both cruelty and survival. By examining the scientific principles at play, we can uncover the warning signs and, perhaps, learn how to prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again. To understand how millions could be led to commit atrocities, we have to look inside the human brain. We are social animals, hardwired for cooperation and survival. Our brains evolved to function within groups, to follow leaders, and to seek safety and structure. This is where the psychology of obedience becomes a powerful and dangerous tool. Think of the famous Milgram experiments. Ordinary people were willing to administer what they believed were painful, even lethal, electric shocks to others, simply because an authority figure in a lab coat told them to. This isn't because they were evil. It's because the pressure to obey a legitimate authority can be so immense that it overrides our own moral compass, our natural empathy. Now, layer on top of that the power of propaganda. When a narrative relentlessly paints another group as a threat, as subhuman, it activates our most primitive fear circuits. The amygdala, our brain's alarm system, goes into overdrive. Rational thought, governed by the prefrontal cortex, gets sidelined. Under constant fear and a structured hierarchy, a chilling equation emerges. Obedience to authority plus the dehumanization of an outgroup can effectively switch off empathy. The brain that is wired for connection is manipulated into becoming an instrument of disconnection and cruelty. It's a terrifying demonstration of how our social biology, under the right or wrong conditions, can be turned against our very humanity. But the story doesn't end with psychology. The physical environment of the camps was a brutal battleground governed by the laws of physics. Let's talk about survival from the perspective of energy. The human body is essentially a machine that requires a constant input of energy, calories, to function, to move, to think, and even just to stay warm. This is a fundamental principle of thermodynamics. In the concentration camps, this system was pushed to its absolute limit and beyond. Starvation wasn't just a feeling of hunger, it was a systematic energy crisis at the cellular level. The daily calorie intake was often less than what's needed for a body at complete rest. This forced the body to make impossible choices. First, it would burn through fat reserves. Then, it would begin to consume muscle tissue itself, a process called catabolism. The body was literally eating itself to survive. This profound energy deficit had cascading effects. The ability to maintain core body temperature plummeted. In the bitter cold of a European winter, this became a deadly application of physics. Without enough energy to generate heat, people were constantly losing it to the environment. Hypothermia was a constant, invisible enemy. Every shiver was a desperate attempt by the body to create warmth, burning precious calories it didn't have. In this environment, survival was a fight against entropy itself, a fight against the inevitable slide into cold, stillness, and disorder. The physics of the camps were as merciless as their guards. The ideology that fueled the Holocaust twisted the language of science into a weapon. And at the heart of Nazi propaganda was a grotesque distortion of biology. The idea of a master race, and the categorization of others, particularly Jewish people, as biologically inferior. This wasn't science, it was pseudoscience, a carefully constructed lie designed to justify persecution. They fabricated racial hierarchies, claiming certain groups were genetically impure or destined for subjugation. This dangerous fiction was presented with the authority of scientific fact, making it incredibly persuasive to a public looking for simple answers in a complex time. It gave a seemingly rational biological justification for hatred. But what does real science, modern genetics, tell us? It tells us the exact opposite. If you sequence the DNA of any two people on Earth, you'll find they are 99.9% identical. That 0.1% difference accounts for our beautiful diversity in appearance, but underneath it all, we are fundamentally, biologically, one human family. The concept of race as a biological category is a social construct, not a genetic reality. The very science that was twisted to divide us now provides the most powerful evidence of our shared humanity. It proves that the biological arguments used to justify the Holocaust were not just immoral, they were a lie, a complete betrayal of the scientific pursuit of truth. By understanding this, we can see how easily science can be misused and why we must always defend it against those who would warp it for their own agendas. Yet, even in the face of unimaginable cruelty and systemic dehumanization, the story of the Holocaust is also one of incredible resilience. The same human biology that was pushed to the brink of collapse also holds the keys to survival and recovery. Consider the concept of neuroplasticity, the brain's amazing ability to rewire itself. For survivors, the trauma was etched into their neural pathways. But over time, through connection, community, and the simple act of living, brains can and do heal. New pathways can be formed, allowing for the processing of grief and the rebuilding of a life. It's a testament to the biological imperative for hope. This resilience extended to a collective level. Survivors went on to rebuild families, create communities, and share their stories, ensuring that memory itself became a biological inheritance passed down through generations. They didn't just survive, they carried forward a legacy of life. The human species, capable of such organized destruction, is also endowed with an equally powerful capacity for organized compassion, for rebuilding, for teaching the next generation. The sunlight breaking through the ruins of a concentration camp, the laughter of children in a classroom learning this history, these are not just poetic images. They are the biological and social embodiment of recovery. They prove that even after the darkest night, the human spirit and the human brain is wired to seek the light. So, where does this leave us? Exploring the Holocaust through the lens of science doesn't provide easy answers. And it certainly doesn't erase the immeasurable pain of history. It doesn't excuse the choices people made. Instead, it offers a different kind of understanding. It helps us see the mechanisms, the psychological triggers, the physical pressures, the biological lies that made the unthinkable possible. It shows us the fragile balance within the human mind between empathy and obedience, between community and tribalism. Understanding these mechanisms is not just an academic exercise. It's a vital tool for vigilance. It helps us recognize the warning signs in our own time, the dehumanizing language, the appeals to blind obedience, the distortion of science. To remember is to learn, and to learn is our greatest hope to prevent. By understanding the science of our darkest chapter, we arm ourselves with the knowledge to write a better, more compassionate future. Thank you for joining me on this difficult but important journey. If this perspective was meaningful to you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more content that explores the deeper questions of our world.